हेलो,
एक
हाँ शिराली जी को भी अनम्यूट करिए और उनको को होस्ट भी बनाइए।
वो तो बना दिया यार, देखते रहो क्या आप? वो
हाँ
अनम्यूट ही है।
अब आ गया, ठीक है।
I am
नहीं अब
unmuted.
हुआ है।
I am
अच्छा,
unmuted.
हाँ ओके
उन्हीं को करना था ना।
Okay, so I'll begin now. Good morning, friends. It's indeed a pleasure to see so many from Indore group once again on this Sunday. I'm indeed very happy and feel privileged to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Shailesh Shirali. Dr. Shirali's association with Krishnamurti Foundation India has been close to 4 decades now. And so has been his association with Krishnamurti's teachings. He has been a teacher of mathematics, principal of Rishi Valley School, and presently director of the Sahyadri Education Center. A senior trustee of Krishnamurti Foundation India, Dr. Shirali is also a very known mathematician, and he doesn't need any introduction in the mathematical world like he doesn't in the Krishnamurti world. A very good speaker. He is presently editor of a magazine called At Right Angles, published by Azim Premji University. It's a tri-annual magazine and very useful as a resource material for school mathematics. I'm very happy that he accepted our offer to speak to this group today. And he'll be talking on imprisoned by words and ideas, can we not break free of them? So with these words, I welcome Shailesh ji once again and would request him to start his talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste to all of you. Yes, this theme, which I've titled Imprisoned by Words and Ideas, is something which has fascinated me for a long time. Because if you look around the world, you can see how powerful words and ideas are, and how great an influence they have on society and on our lives in ways that we may not suspect. Ideas sometimes rule what we do, and they may be lying hidden underneath our motives, underneath our actions. So today I'm going to try to develop this theme a little bit. It's an extremely complex theme, and I think I will just be sort of scratching the surface of this theme, but let's see how far we can go. I hope there will be some question-answer opportunity for questions at the end of it to further develop the idea. First of all, let me start by saying that words can be very beautiful. So let me start focusing on that aspect at the beginning. So who does not love beautiful writing? So don't we all love it when authors use words poetically and beautifully? Don't we all love it when we have a beautifully delivered line in a talk or a speech, or a beautiful line in a poem? Let me just quote some lines like that. Here's a line from the great poet Robert Frost, very famous. These woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Just feel the rhythm of that. They're very beautifully put together words. Then here's another piece by another author, equally famous. There was once a town in the heart of America where all life seemed to live in harmony with its surroundings. The town lay in the midst of a checkerboard of prosperous farms, with fields of grain and hillsides of orchards, where in spring, white clouds of bloom drifted above the green fields. In autumn, oak and maple and birch set up a blaze of color that flamed and flickered across a backdrop of pines. Then foxes barked in the hills, and deer silently crossed the fields, half hidden in the mists of the fall morning. So this is written by one very great environmentalist, Rachel Carson, who might be described as the person who started the whole environmental movement, which is so strong right now. And see the beauty with which she has written those words. And then I'll quote one more piece, this time by Krishnamurti, whom we all know can write so lyrically. There is a tree by the river, And we have been watching it day after day for several weeks when the sun is about to rise. As the sun rises slowly over the horizon, over the trees, this particular tree becomes all of a sudden golden. All the leaves are bright with life. And as you watch it, as the hours pass by, an extraordinary quality seems to spread all over the land, over the river. As the sun rises a little higher, the leaves begin to flutter, to dance. Each hour seems to give to that tree a different quality. Before the sun rises, it has a somber feeling, quiet, far away, full of dignity. As the day begins, the leaves with the light on them dance and give it that peculiar feeling that one has of great beauty. By midday, its shadow has deepened and you can sit there protected from the sun, never feeling lonely, with the tree as your companion. As you sit there, there is a relationship of deep, abiding security and a freedom that only trees can know. So I quoted these few lines in an effort to show you that words can be very beautiful. There can be a great charm, a great delight in reading words that have been put together elegantly. So much so that we can also fall in love with words. We can even get addicted to words. And I'm going to quote another piece from Krishnamurti, which captures this very powerfully when he writes. This comes from the Commentaries on Living, one of the pieces. He had read intensively, and though he was poor, he considered himself rich in knowledge, which gave him a certain happiness. He spent many hours with his books and a great deal of time by himself. He was oddly self-contained, independent, and quietly assertive. He had come a long way, he said, to talk about the use of certain chants and phrases, whose constant repetition was highly conducive to the pacification of the mind. In the words, there was a certain magic. The words must be pronounced and chanted correctly. The beauty of the words with their rhythmic cadence brought about an atmosphere that was helpful to concentration. And he began to chant. He had a pleasant voice, and there was a mellowness born of the love of words and their meaning. He chanted with the ease of long practice and devotion. And the moment he began to chant, he was lost to everything. So I hope the point that I'm trying to make has become clear, that words have a great fascination for us. There can be great beauty in them, great charm, great elegance. And if in the hands of a skillful writer or a skillful speaker, you can really create a feeling of magic with the right words. Now, just to give a background to the past, back in Greek times, they had the notion of logos. Logos is a Greek word which, well, it's the origin of the word logic, obviously. And logos has the connotation of the word of God. And they gave a great importance to this. In fact, there is the principle of speaking, which we won't go into here, in which they said there are three ways of communicating with an audience. It could be ethos, pathos, or logos, and so on. There's a long theory behind it, which we need not go into. But it's interesting that the first line in one of the books of the Bible is this: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And in Islam too, there is a very similar notion. They have a word which is like the Hindi word akal. It's akl, which is an Arabic word, and it means intellect, basically, or something like that. So the notion of word, of language, as having great power and great significance in life goes back to very ancient times. Now, I'm going to jump to the modern time, to the present day, and first start by quoting to you a few words which we can see right away have got great power in them. They would be called very loaded words. Let me just reel off a few to you. And you can see, the moment I read them, you'll see what I mean. Right, wrong, good, evil, heaven, hell, salvation, enlightenment. All these have a certain power in them. They affect us in certain ways. They are not innocent words. Then let me quote another set of words which are also equally powerful. Progress, future, growth, equality, justice, brotherhood, secularism, individual, freedom. Some of these words began to take great significance in human history somewhere around the time of the French Revolution, somewhere what happened in Europe around that time. Okay, another set of words. Patriotism, patriot, my country, motherland, fatherland, and a term which goes back to Nazi Germany, Führer, the father. All these terms become vital in any fascist setting. Then another set of words which have a political flavor to them. Right wing, left wing, communist, red, Naxalite, and then words which have become extremely loaded in India today. Muslim, Hindu, Christian. Then similarly, going back to European history, Jew, Nazi. Then yet another set of words which are very active right now in the world. Black, Negro. The word Negro has become discredited, but we know what it means. Slave, race, Dalit, Harijan, fair. That's a word which is curiously potent in India and has all kinds of horrible connotations to it. Like in that brand, Fair and Lovely, we have a terrible problem with that notion. But it's a word which has great power in it. And then, of course, we all are familiar with swear words, which also contain a great potency in them. They affect us. So from these, we can see that our fascination for words is not a simple and benign thing. We can fall in love with beautifully written passages like the ones I quoted to you in the beginning. But there are all these words which affect us and which carry great ability to affect our actions. So they are not benign. And if you take words like progress and future and growth, these not only have effects on our actions, they have powerful consequences on the state of the world itself. Our whole environment, you can say, the environmental degradation that we are experiencing today is connected with this whole notion of progress and growth. So how does this happen actually? What is the connection between ideas and words? After all, ideas are formed out of words. At the core of an idea, there is a word, and that word is packed with a certain meaning. And we then build a certain way of describing it, of putting it into a certain context. And when there are many such things put together, we may build it into an ideology. So you have these three related notions: words and ideas and ideology. And so for example, you may have a whole theory around the single word freedom, or around the single word equality. Just to give you an example again from the modern context, the present day context, the word freedom. Look at this extraordinary situation that is existing in the United States around their gun problem. They have a huge problem with guns. They have more per capita guns than any other country in the world. And it's all related to something that is called the Second Amendment. And it's basically a kind of freedom, a right to bear arms. Now that right or that freedom is taken in such a literal sense that look what it has led to. So that single innocent sounding word freedom can lead to the most extraordinary situations, as it has in America. not just there, in many other places. So what is the difficulty with words and ideas? The difficulty comes, I think, because we lose touch with reality because of those words and ideas. After all, very often it happens that when you name something or when you capture something in a description, we seem to be more satisfied with the description than with the thing itself. Now, this is a phenomenon which has been pointed out by Krishnaji so many times. He has used this phrase, thousands of times probably in his talks, that the word is not the thing. And here's an example that I would like to give you from the physicist Richard Feynman. It's an episode described by him in one of his books. So on one occasion, apparently, when Feynman was a young boy, his father pointed to a bird and told him its name. Then he said, this is its name in English, but here is its name in French. After that, he told him its name in German and in Polish and in Russian. And he told him its name in some 7 or 8 more different languages. And then he told him, you know the bird's name in so many different languages, but actually you don't know anything about that bird. All you know is its name. Now, this is a very interesting observation, which Feynman heard as a young boy, you can say. It must have affected him. I don't know what kind of an influence it left in him in the long run, but it tells us something, that we have this strong human trait in us, that when we know the name of something, we seem to imagine that we know it. I don't know how this notion gets so fixed in our heads. Once we have captured a notion in a word and formulated it very clearly and precisely, we develop the feeling that we have completely understood the notion. The more precisely, the more articulately we have described it, the more we are convinced that we have understood it. Now, Krishnaji has been at pains to tell us that the word is not the thing. And yet it's strange that for humanity as a whole, exactly the opposite seems to be true. The word seems to be very much the thing. And I think this is one of the tragedies of language. Now, once we have clearly formulated and articulated an idea, then it becomes subject to logic and further argumentation. From ideas, we deduce consequences. From those consequences, perhaps still further ideas, which are logical derivatives of the original idea. And we get gradually ideas piled one on top of the other. And a whole theory gets built up. And after some time, it's so complex, it's such a large whole that we may not be able to see even the structure of this, where actually we have come from. So this is something which we need to become aware of, and our tendency to fall in love with these ideas, the more elegant they are, and the more they are able to explain things in a very conclusive and neat way, the more we seem to fall in love with these things. And I'll give you an example of this, which has had great consequence. For example, it's not very talked about nowadays, but it was a big thing in the 19th century. We all know that in the mid-19th century, Charles Darwin came up with his theory of evolution. Now, what did he do? What did he accomplish in this theory? He explained the origin of species, sometimes how species go extinct, and all of it was based on one single principle, the principle of natural selection. And of course, there's more to it, variability in individuals of a species, and then coupled with natural selection. And sometimes this is captured in that phrase, survival of the fittest. Now, Darwin merely came up with this theory to explain things that he had seen in the natural world. He did not, as far as we know, he did not try to extrapolate it beyond its boundaries. But others who were around in his day were quick to do that. So intellectuals, for example, they were quick to latch on to this phrase, survival of the fittest. And they went on to apply them to the social structures of the day. And it began to be called social Darwinism. And it became extremely popular in England in North America and Europe because it was extremely convenient. First of all, it explained away the race problem. You can quickly say slavery is not a problem because, you know, social survival of the fittest, etc. Imperialism is not a problem. It's a natural expression of superiority of one race over another. So you have the race problem explained away, slavery explained away, imperialism, and many such social phenomena get explained away. And it also offered a very convenient reason for discouraging reform. So if it's something which fits in with natural law, why would you want to change it? So you can see how attractive it is to someone who wants to maintain the status quo. And as the decades passed, other people made use of it. For example, the Nazis were very fond of it, though they may not have used that particular term. They liked it because they could use that idea to propagate eugenics, the whole idea of trying to get rid of one race and have only one so-called superior race in its place. So you see how in this one idea, this idea of survival of the fittest or natural selection, which, you know, it has a perfectly valid place in the space it was meant to occupy, which is trying to understand the natural world. How when you take this idea and twist it out of all shape, and then what havoc it can cause in the world. Real havoc. Genocides have resulted from it. Or take another set of words which I mentioned a little while back. Progress, growth, development, future. These are another set of words which one can completely fall in love with. And probably there can be few ideas which are more destructive than those ideas which are linked to these, because you're talking of perpetual consumption, perpetual infinite growth, which is what has been happening over the last maybe century or so. The world, the way our economic development is going, the way we are so convinced that economies have to grow. There's no such, an economy which is not growing is a failure. And we don't recognize that there's something drastically wrong with our whole way of thinking. We don't look at, say, nature and say, hey, the population of deer isn't always on the increase. It has a certain stable level. Nevertheless, we have fallen in love with these words: progress, growth, development, and future. And there's another side to it, which is future also means that it's the future which matters, not the present. And therefore, you can sacrifice the present generation for the sake of a future generation. You can, so in the name of this notion, this concept, you can justify killings. And that's exactly what has happened again in many parts of the world. For example, if you look at, they say, the history of Soviet Union, which doesn't exist today, but in the 1920s and 30s, enormous number of killings happened in Soviet Union in the name of collectivization and so on. They're trying to enforce the principles of communism. And there's a famous statement which I believe has been made by Stalin in this connection. He says, you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. So it doesn't matter if a few thousands, 10,000s, millions die, if the future is going to benefit. So you can see out here how one can be intoxicated with the idea of future, a certain idea which is captured by this word future. So let's continue. Now, ideas, because they are subject to logical development, they lead to more ideas. And over time, one ideology comes into conflict with another ideology. And then we seek a resolution of this conflict. We can't have two ideologies coexisting, especially in today's world when we have highly mobile populations, people moving about all over the world, religions come into contact, and so on. So you will notice another notion which has grown in more recent times to cope with this kind of conflict is that of moral relativism. The idea that everything is relative, morality is relative. So and everything is only culture dependent. Nothing is right, nothing is wrong. Everything is simply a matter of which culture you grow up in. So now you'll notice that this is a very neat way of getting out of this problem of knowing what to do. Just say that everything is relative. It's a rather strange sort of accepting a kind of a defeat in the situation. And really, if you think about it, it doesn't solve anything at all. It's just a way of hiding from reality. And this is something which is perhaps an old trait of ours, that when reality is unpleasant or too complicated to deal with, we cover it, paint it over with comforting ideas. And it's a way of plastering harsh reality with something comforting, something which doesn't offend us like that. So just now I talked about the clash of ideologies. In the same way, you can have the clash of religions with their own belief structures, their superstitions, their moralities. And so along comes a higher body and says, all religions are equal. We must respect all religions. No religion is higher than any other. And this is, again, it's a modern attitude, but you can see that it's pure idea. It's an idea which we hope to impose on society. But deep down, I think we don't actually believe it. That means it's an idea with which we are living in conflict. We don't actually subscribe to it, and yet we try to approximate our actions to it. So how did we acquire this characteristic? This ability to fall in love with something unreal, this ability or this tendency to avoid reality. Let me quote another piece from Krishnamurti here. How strangely we are caught in the sound of words, and how important the words have become to us. Country, God, priest, democracy, revolution. We live on words and delight in the sensations they produce. And it is these sensations that have become so important. Words are satisfying because their sounds reawaken forgotten sensations. And the satisfaction is greater when words substitute the actual. We try to fill our inward emptiness with words, with sound, with noise, with activity. Music and the chant are a happy escape from ourselves, from our pettiness and boredom. Words fill our libraries, and how incessantly we talk. We hardly dare to be without a book, or to be unoccupied, to be alone. So what has been said in this passage, I think, is quite significant. He says, we live on words and delight in the sensations they produce. And it is these sensations that have become so important. These sounds reawaken forgotten sensations. I think these are matters which are worth exploring further. Why we get so addicted and so dependent on certain concepts. Now let me at this point take up something which has become immensely relevant in the present time, and that is the notion of fundamentalism. Fundamentalism has become a very serious problem. It is viewed as a political problem, social problem. Now how do we understand the notion of fundamentalism? Somehow in today's world, fundamentalism has got linked, the word in the popular imagination, it gets linked with just one particular religion. And people will probably be surprised when they discover that fundamentalism is there in every single religion that exists on the earth right now. Every single religion, without any exception. So the term itself comes from the phrase, going back to the fundamentals. So what happens when there is a serious situation which troubles us? We reach for the holy books or the scriptures, something in our ancient past, and we interpret them literally. We take them to be literally true. Why do we do this? Perhaps because life is so uncertain. It is so disorderly. It is so difficult to contain, so many loose strands, pokey points in it. Therefore, we demand that life should be organized according to the book, according to that neat, our memory of some ancient past, organized according to words written down in some ancient times. And the greater the social uncertainty and insecurity of the times, the stronger is the demand that everything around us should be organized the way it was written. The stronger is the demand that conditions stay unchanged. Now, this is something which we need to understand, this tendency in us of how when conditions get insecure, we retreat and we like to impose a certain notion of constancy and going back to an imagined past when everything was perfect. So there's a very strong tendency. And just to give you an example of historically how such a thing can lead to huge consequences, take Italy of the early part of last century, 1920s. There was a strong notion among the leaders of that country at that time that they must restore the motherland to its former greatness. And what is that former greatness? Well, we all know, we know about the great Roman Empire of ancient times, what was called the Holy Roman Empire. And this idea was there in those people, and they became extraordinarily pompous and stupid, you can say, by really believing it. And of course, they tried all kinds of invasions and further colonial attempts, Mussolini and people like that. So just see what that idea of trying to restore some ancient past, what it led that country to do. And this theme is growing in strength in many countries, and it is certainly growing in strength in India. For example, there is the very strong desire to construct the Ram temple in Ayodhya. What lies behind that desire, if not exactly this idea that you have some imagined greatness in the past, where everything was perfect, and you long for that. So what actually happens in the mind of a fundamentalist? What is it that gives us this feeling that we can keep falling back on the book, trying to construct something out of the book? What actually happens? Is it the promise of a place in heaven? Is it the promise of bringing purity and greatness and restoring past glory to the motherland? You'll notice how every one of these is just ideas piled on more ideas. The whole idea of purity. You want purity of a culture. You've already decided what is that purity. So it's an idea. It's nothing to do with actual. You've already decided what was the past glory of your country, of your motherland, and you want to restore some past glory. All, you see, ideas and ideas. So absolute faith in the book and in the word, I think, lead to absolute disaster. It's a really very serious situation in the world today. And as I said, fundamentalism has not left any religion unscathed. Every single religion suffers from this problem. And it's very sad how we have allowed words to drive us into this situation. So now, having very briefly sketched this landscape of how we have become so dependent on words, dependent on ideas, dependent on ideologies, and naturally we have to ask this final question: is there an antidote to this malaise, an antidote to this illness, you can call? And certainly there is. And I'd like to read out something from Krishnamurti here. There's a question asked in a question and answer session in Brockwood Park in 1979. Where someone asks him, why does the mind so readily accept trivial answers to deeply felt problems? And he responds, why does one accept a trivial explanation where a deep problem is concerned? Why does one live in words? That's the real problem. Why have words become so immensely important? One suffers, goes through great agonies, and someone comes along and gives explanations. And in these explanations, one seeks comfort. There is God, there is reincarnation, there is this, there is that. One accepts the word and the explanation because the belief gives one comfort when one is in agony, in a state of anxiety. The explanations by philosophers, by psychologists, by priests, by gurus and teachers, it is on these that one lives, which means that one lives second-hand. One is a second-hand person and one is satisfied. The word God is a symbol. Symbols become extraordinarily important, like the flag. Why? One reads a great deal what other people have read, have thought. And it's always somebody else out there telling one what to do. One's mind is crippled by this, and one is always living at second hand. One is never asked, can I be a light to myself? Not the light of someone else, not the light of Jesus or the Buddha. Can one be a light to oneself? Which means there is no shadow. For to be a light to oneself means it is never put out by any artificial means, by circumstances, by sorrow, by accident. Can one be that to oneself? One can be that to oneself only when one's mind has no challenge because it is so fully awake. But most of us need challenges because most of us are asleep. Asleep because we have been put to sleep by all the philosophers, by all the saints, by all the gods and priests and politicians. One has been put to sleep and one does not know that one is asleep. One thinks that that is normal. A man who wants to be a light to himself has to be free of all this. One can be a light to oneself only when there is no self. Then that light is the eternal, everlasting, immeasurable light. So I'd like to bring this to a close now and ask myself, what can I do actually? Can I become aware in a living way, in the present, of the ideas that drive me, the ideas on which I have become fixated, the ideas with which I have fallen in love? Can I actually become aware of how I'm living on borrowed ideas? Can I become aware of how I'm living a second-hand life? This phrase, second-hand, has been used several times in that passage. Can I become aware actually of in what way I am being second-hand by living on words and ideas which I have absorbed from the environment, from books, from people around me? Can I free myself from the bondage of words? Can I look at a human being and see him without the label, which is just another word? So all of it comes to that one single question. Can I ask myself profoundly and with intensity, can I be a light unto myself? I think only if I really ask myself all these questions with some intensity, with some degree of honesty, if I am prepared to go through the pain that those questions may bring me, perhaps only then there is some possibility of my going in this direction. So I'd like to close at this point. As I said, I wanted to explore what is it about words and ideas that have made them so important in our lives in a negative sense. Why is it that we allow ideas, ideologies, words to drive our actions to such an extent that we lose sight of human beings, we lose sight of the present. We either live in some imagined past or in some imagined future. And we try to create a certain kind of an effect which is a pure conception. And then I shared Krishnaji's observation here of what is it that makes us addicted to these notions. So let me stop here and see how we can take this forward through a few questions.
Thank you very much, Shirali ji. Among the listeners, names, I just give you the name: Harsh Tankha, Dr. Rao, Mr. Kef, and coordinator already. So, without wasting time, I request Dubey Sahab to continue with his questions to you.
Okay, thank you, Jayant sir. Thank you, Shailesh ji. It was beautiful talk. You have given us lots of food for thought. But my questions are basically on Krishna ji and his teachings. So I'll begin with my first question. You know, Krishna ji often talked about brain and mind and as if they're the same thing. But I've also read at one or two places where he makes a very clear distinction and say that brain is basically a center of cognition in our body, which, you know, has all the conditionings, knowledge, experiences, and so on. And he says the mind could even not be a part of the physical body, which contains compassion, insight, and so on. So I would like to know what is your response to this statement?
Well, this is an extremely complex matter that you have asked, actually. And I'm not at all sure that I will be able to answer it in any satisfactory way. It's fairly clear what the brain is. If we look at it in terms of the brain being what we actually have inside our skull, you can say, the brain which has evolved in a certain way over the past few 100,000 years and taken a certain shape in us. But when you talk in terms of a mind which sort of can speak to the brain, which is not an individual, it's not something, an individual attribute, an individual possession. It's something which I'm afraid I'm not sure I would like to speculate in this. Perhaps one can only think of it in terms of an analogy. Just like consciousness is not something which is localized and concentrated inside any one of us. Perhaps a good analogy would be language. We may speak all a common language. That common language does not belong to anybody at all. It's just there, and we all partake of it, make use of it. It penetrates us, goes through us, and affects certain actions. I think in the same way, I'm referring here to the consciousness of mankind. I'm not quite sure when Krishnaji talks about mind. Now that has a different connotation that may have a much vaster connotation, which I really don't know. I would not like to speculate in that area. So I'm sorry, but I would like to pass that question. I would prefer to say something about brain and about the shared consciousness of mankind. But mind is a different thing altogether. If it's the kind of significance that Krishnaji gave to that term suggests that it is not something which we can readily talk about. So if you don't mind, I will pause here.
Perfectly all right. I'll go to the next question now. You know, I had a meeting with Achyut ji 2 two years before he passed away. And in our talks, he mentioned that Krishnaji healed many people physically. But reading Krishnaji's biography, one finds that he himself went through several illnesses and suffered a lot physically and had to be operated on by doctors or treated with antibiotics for a long period. So does it mean that a person like that, whether we call him a liberated person or a free person or a saint, cannot heal himself the way he can heal others? What is your take on this?
Well, that seems to be the case. Again, you are asking a question about which really, I'm not sure that we have any rational way of approaching such a matter, because these things are in some ways beyond our rational understanding. We have no real sense what it means, the kind of energies which Krishnaji was talking about. And they say there are other people who have done similar things. You know, what does it mean that he can sort of move his hands over a person, and obviously some kind of energy seems to be present which can perform some change in the body. I would, first of all, he himself has been asked this, and he used to answer. I remember a conversation which he had with children of Rishi Valley a long time back. I was not, it was much before I joined Rishi Valley, but he made this statement that when there is real absence of self, it is possible that these things manifest on their own without. So he refused to accept that there was something extraordinary happening. He would say that when there is real absence of self, when there is real goodness in the pure sense of that word, that these things happen. And I think you're talking here when you ask such a question about the very role of Krishnamurti. Who was Krishnamurti? Why did he appear at this particular point in time? What was his role? He himself never answered this question. When anybody tried to ask him, he would say, instead of asking me, who am I? You look at yourself and ask, who are you? He never responded with any answer to that. He even made the statement to Mary Lutyens and Mary Zimbalist that exactly who the significance of what he is not something that he is supposed to know. He made a statement, it is not my business to know. But he also said that you can find out if you do know, but I cannot. It's a very strange statement, really. And I can only say, well, he said it. I don't know what is it that one can comment about that. See, these are things which one cannot know about rationally. They don't seem to be even things that one can really discuss. One can only speculate. And there is a danger of the very thing that we are talking about. These things can become ideas. These things can become notions. We don't know. Much like reincarnation, for example. Is there any truth in reincarnation? Or it just becomes another belief, another idea? So I'm not sure I can answer these questions, Dubeyji, when you ask about whether he could have healed himself or not. It is as though it was not meant to be that way. It seems to be a case where it's not meant to be, it's not a healing ability which is meant to be used that way. It may have never even occurred to him, that question, that it could be used that way.
I'll move to the next one.
Yes, please.
Another mysterious happening of Krishna's life that we read about is this thing called process, which he went through at various periods of his life. Do you think this is same as awakening of Kundalini as the Hindu scriptures talk about?
I am inclined to not accept that, because I don't know where this whole notion has come about in our own scriptures. On what basis? I mean, unless we are prepared to accept that there were many, sufficiently many people who experienced this, who could, you can almost make it into a sort of science. That sounds extremely odd, because it's possible. Nothing, again, we are dealing with something which is right at the frontier of the known. We don't know, but all the things that Krishnaji describes and other observers who watched him describe, he's talking about some mysterious force which which seems to have operated on his brain. And so these are all things which perhaps I would say that there is a danger in talking about them. There's a danger because they bring about a certain fascination in us for that mysterious thing called Kundalini, and it will forever remain a concept, because we will just read what other people have written about it. We will go back to the scriptures and try to unearth some mysteries about it, and we will read the descriptions about it. So it will forever remain a second-hand knowledge, though it may be immensely attractive as an idea, given that we have this real phenomenon which we have seen before us, Krishnaji. But I think it is my own sense is that it is best to leave these matters alone, because they can become like addictions. We can get intoxicated by these kinds of questions. And why intoxicated? Because we will never know whether it's right or wrong. We will always be dabbling in speculation. So that's my response to you. I know it's not
the next one.
Yeah, it's not a completely satisfactory response, but that's
it's
anyway.
Okay. I just wanted to view, that's all. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Do you think, Dr. Shirali, that those who read K's books or see his videos can have the same understanding and perception of his teachings as those who actually lived and heard him in person? Or do you think the physical absence of Krishnaji now is not necessarily a great deprivation for someone who is wanting to explore his teachings?
That's a very important question. I think we can certainly spend time on it. I think it is possible for a person who is very serious, who is willing to sit down with the books and the videos and really penetrate the questions with great seriousness. Somebody who realizes the importance of understanding his own nature, his own activities, his own prejudices and so on. I think that it's a person who can capture that perfume from the teachings, can very well do so even if he has never seen or never met Krishnamurti. I don't believe that that is necessarily a factor. It can be, in fact, Krishnaji himself pointed out that, you see, he was like a flame. I think the closer you came to him, the more of a flame he was. And such a person can affect you in all kinds of ways. We know very well from his biographies how people were, they could be so affected by him as to become fascinated by him. They get sort of, they fall in love with him. They completely get intoxicated by his nature. And I think that it can act in a way which is quite contrary to the very thing that Krishnaji talked about. When he said, my only concern is to set man absolutely unconditionally free. Well, such a person then is not free, because he gets completely ensnared by always this thought of Krishnaji. So I think in some ways it can be it can be a better thing if you are slightly separated from that intense close proximity. Of course, if one is very intelligent, then that proximity need not result in that. Then of course there's a different quality altogether. When you can actually see the living quality of Krishnamurti, which is his, you see, Krishnaji is not just his teaching. There's so many dimensions to Krishnamurti. There's also the way he would attend to simple practical problems of life. What is that mind that he brought to bear on living? And there's something to learn from that, the way he would address a problem. So to actually see in action some of the things that he would talk about, there is great potential for learning from that if you had the good fortune to be in contact with him. So I would put it as a qualified answer. The danger of being too close to him personally is that you can end up getting completely fascinated by his persona and not be able to free yourself from that. Get too fascinated by the person. But potentially, there is great, if one is intent on it, I think one can learn an enormous amount just by watching how such a person lives.
Okay, I'll go to the next one now. What in your view has been the impact of Krishnaji on the human consciousness? I know it's a difficult question because perhaps one lifetime is too short a period to assess such a phenomenon, but still, what would you say?
I think he has brought to a certain focus on certain notions. The very thing which perhaps I dwelt on in today's talk, his very strong pointing out the way in which we get attracted and affected by ideas, ideologies, by the image. He has certainly left an extraordinarily strong body of pointers, you can say, extremely strong. But perhaps humanity has not yet been able to make real full use of it, because perhaps they have converted much of this into ideas. For example, freedom. Krishnaji used the word freedom very extensively in his life. The word freedom, I think, gets captured into an idea very, very easily. In our own schools, he would point out that, something about competition. But you can simply have an idea that there should not be competition, and therefore, it can become like it can just drive you as an idea without it's actually becoming a real thing. I would say he has affected in a quiet way. He has many things in modern day world have, you can see some of the language that he used, some of the notions, they have found their way into society. So in a way, he has affected the consciousness of humanity, but it looks at the moment like a fairly mild effect. It has hardly left a powerful impress, powerful enough to actually affect the structure of society. So he has left, but it is far from, people have latched on to his words, certainly. The very fact that there are so many gurus in the world right now who are using the very language that he used is significant. They have latched on to his words. So his words are very, very current in the world today, but not perhaps the spirit of them. And maybe we will not know. He himself used to point out that the true touch, the effect of a teacher is perhaps you can make it out only after a generation has passed. Maybe, and in fact, he passed away, about 86 or 34 years back. All right. So in another 10 years, it would be like about 45 years. Probably we will get a sense of the real effect of his teaching on the world only after another decade or so, when a new generation of people come who take this up, who never knew him personally, but are serious enough to take up those books, those resources, and therefore they are not affected by any personal memory of Krishnamurti. Perhaps that generation will have to take up these questions, and well, let's hope that will happen actually.
I come to my next question. Krishnaji has described in great detail about the need of cooperation, true cooperation, which is out of love and not out of mutual gratification. Yet it does not appear to have come about easily around him even while he was alive. What do you think would be the reason for this?
Maybe this very phenomenon, which just now I alluded to, that I think many of the people who he came into contact with wanted to actually possess him, because there was something so tremendously attractive, I think, about him, that there's a desire to just, hold on to him and make him your own possession, you can say. And perhaps there would have been that tendency in this group of people. So the very thing that he talked about, it's only the few, I think, who would have listened to him with that kind of a clarity, that I'm here to learn and not here to simply get close to the man, get as close to him as possible. Because I think people who have actually been close to him have described him, he was like a flame. You can't get close to such a person without getting burnt. There was such an extraordinary energy about him. And I think it needs if you consider the intelligence of the teacher, it needs a very high order of intelligence on the part of the pupil to be able to take from such a teacher. So I don't know, unless there is, I cannot again, really give a conclusive answer to this, but it seems fairly clear that these human factors intruded. It was not so much a pure intention to free oneself as a desire to come close, perhaps, to the source. That may have been something. Or the other possibility is that we are talking about something which is so complex that the quality of seriousness one has to give to this question is of an order of magnitude which we may not be fully understanding. The kind of, we may think that it's just a matter of just thinking about it and something happening to us. But how many of us, for example, have taken this statement of his seriously? He said, for your studies, you're prepared to spend 15 years in school and college and higher degrees, 15 years preparing ourselves for some career. How long do we spend on this question, on these questions? Why is it that we find answers so easily? And it's the same, that passage which I read out. Why is it that we accept so easily answers to deeply felt problems? I think the demand on us is really very, very strong. And unless we are prepared to do that, I think we are going to just live in a mediocre way, just go sort of halfway up the hill, as he would say.
Yeah. Thank you, Shailesh. Thank you so much. I have come to the end of my questions now. If you have any personal anecdotes with Krishnaji and you would like to share, please go ahead, because there are questions coming up now. So I leave the floor to others to ask. But if you have anything you want to share, please do that.
Well, there may not be time for this, but the one
there is
thing
still
which
time, sir. You can share.
The one thing that really touched me was the humility and affection that he had, the quality of humility and the quality of affection, which I saw. I did not have that much of a contact with him. By the time I joined Rishi Valley, it was close to his end, you can say. But that quality came through in just the little contact that I had with him. For example, once we were going up the stairs to his room, and he turned around and said, "Don't be nervous, I'm just an old man." And I found that extremely moving, the way he said it. "I'm just an old man, you know, don't get nervous of me." It was something so simple, and the sense of that when he was with you, that you mattered to him immensely. You may have been just a nobody, just somebody who has come to see him, but in that moment, you seemed to matter to him tremendously, as if he really was interested in your life, in what you would do. Yeah, that quality came through very powerfully. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Shirali. Now,
Yes, Mr. Vyas has a question, so let him ask Dr. Shirali about that.
Mr. Vyas, unmute yourself. Mr. Vyas.
Yeah, I have put the question. I have typed the question.
No.
Yeah, I would like to ask.
Yes.
Yeah. So
verbally you have to read it out.
Yeah, I was just saying is I see a lot of very few young people. Although I started reading Krishnaji when I was around 20 or 25, but very few young people in the meetings and coming for the workshops. So my question is the teachings a bit complicated or complex, and do people find it that it can't be put into in our day-to-day living in this complex society which we live in? What has been your take on with your interactions with students?
Oh, you're right. You're right in a way, but I'm not sure that the time, it's as if times have changed. See, there's a big difference between his lifetime, when he was around, he attracted a lot of people who came into the schools, who came into education, who joined his work in different ways. Now he's no more. So what is going to attract people? perhaps we ourselves have not made a strong enough, concerted enough move to make his teachings known to people. Now that is part of our work. That is part of the work of the schools, part of work of the foundations, how to, I don't know what word to use. I don't like to use the word dissemination, but there has to be a greater work on the part of people to talk with others in their language. In fact, to do something very much what Krishnaji himself did. Krishnaji was willing to talk with almost anybody, with experts, with scientists, with just about anybody at all. And he had a way of drawing people out and taking things forward from whatever they said. Perhaps not enough of that is happening. It's something which we need to do more of. There are some efforts happening right now in the schools, but it may be not large enough, not significant enough. But I think the mood of the world also is changing, and perhaps still a certain change comes in people which may have to come naturally. There's a tremendous drive towards entertainment right now, a tremendous drive towards dependence on sensation through entertainment, through devices. So in some ways, we are being drawn still further away from life. At the same time, there is this tremendous threat of the environment today. Environmental collapse is happening. And out of nowhere, this pandemic has struck us down. So it's possible that these themselves may bring about some changes in people and bring about greater receptivity to conversations in these areas. But I would say over the past few years, precisely because of increasing prosperity, increasing globalization, there's an intoxication with this business of progress and growth and so on. And all this actually draws us away from some of the questions that we are asking. Everything is focused on the outer. All energy gets focused on the outer. Maybe there's the situation that is coming about could create conditions that may focus some energy on the inner. So that at least the conditions are there. Whether we will take it up, we don't know. But there are some hopeful signs in the world right now. But if you look at the past, say 20, 30 years, yes, I would agree. It is not a very promising situation. Because though there are young people coming into education, there are very few young people who declare any interest in these matters. That is true. So I'll stop there.
Dinesh Wagmar.
Mr. Shirali, I want to ask you. Hello, can you listen to me?
Yes,
hello?
Please.
I want to ask you, mind cannot move without the words. And what I think, there is no problem with the spiritual books. It is a problem with how do you use them? Like in technological world also we see the words have done miracles, the thoughts have done miracles. Similarly, in psychological field also, it is mainly based on our intentions or the vested interest, which is creating problem. It is not the serious. Yes. People are not having the serious question, so that they are not getting attracted towards the Krishnamurti. That's what I think. What are your views?
Yeah. Yes, you are right. Of course. There is a very simple answer to this question of why we should, whether words are a prison in themselves. They are not. It's we who make them into a prison. It's not that they are by themselves a prison. if our interest is in listening, if our interest is in knowing what is actually there, then we won't get addicted to words. We won't get addicted to ideas. If it depends on our own interest, really, our own intention, how serious we are about listening and getting to know the actual. Of course, what you're saying is true. It's not the words in themselves which are the culprit. It's our attitude to them. It's the way, what we have done with them. We make them into things which are more important than they are. They should be just ways of communicating with each other. But we have given them a higher significance than that. We have elevated particularly a few particular words. So yes, I agree with what you have said.
Philji,
Yes, please.
I don't think there is any question.
Shirali sir, would you please like to be continue with your own experience with Krishnamurti?
I see one hand up.
That is my wish. Take it this as a question. I wanted to know something more from you about Krishnamurti.
Well, I will only say this then, that Krishnamurti himself did not give importance to theories and ideas, though they may have their uses, they may have their place in life, but he himself did not give any importance. To him, the one thing that mattered more than anything else was people being able to work with each other, who would not allow any barriers to come in between them, who were absolutely intent that if any misunderstanding would arise, they would wipe them out. He made this very strong statement. I remember a group of teachers going and meeting him the very last year that he came to Rishi Valley. And when it became clear that that was going to be his last visit, that he would not be coming back, he made this statement that, can you be one body? He asked the teachers, can you be one body? Can you live like that? It's a very sobering thought, I think. The notion that you completely forget this whole idea that you have your own space, your own individuality, all that business. Can we actually explore, as a group of people, explore what it means to be like that? So that's a very powerful and sobering notion. So perhaps I'll just stop there. I'm not sure I have there could be other things, but perhaps I'll stop there. All right.
Anga Mogriwal wanted to ask a question to you. Unmute Anga.
Yes, please.
Okay, ji, Anga ko unmute kar.
I think she is not there. She raised her hand and thereafter she is missing.
Okay.
टोके जी, भरत रावत भी पूछना चाह रहे हैं, उनका मैसेज आया मेरे को।
हाँ, भरत रावत को बोल। ये हमारे यहाँ के सर सीनियर कार्डियोलॉजिस्ट है ये। He is asking some question to you. बोले भरत रावत जी।
First of all, it is such a nice session on Guru Purnima to listen to such a nice topic today. And Dr. Rao, it is so nice to see you again. Incidentally, Premchandra ji is my Jiaji, my brother-in-law who is working with you. Anyway, so Shailesh ji, I heard you, and I think right in the beginning you said that we are sort of conditioned so much, and I also feel that we are in a hypnotized manner, living our most of the lives. We only react, we hardly act. Looks like that. And I think one of the ways that I understand is to spend more time in nature and to switch off the gadgets, which you just touched the point in the last again. I think we allow ourselves to become like a puppet in the hands of outside world by interacting more and more. I guess all of us need to really have a balance how much we want to be in the dealing with the outside world. And it's not like living in cave, but I guess we should go to cave. I mean, we should go to and spend some time and not spend all the time with the outside world, because then we are allowing the outside world to hypnotize. I guess we all need to really stay away from the outside world in a balanced way, so that we don't get hypnotized.
All right. So maybe we'll leave it at that. So it's a comment that you have made rather than a question. So perhaps shall we stop here? I think it will be nice.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, goodbye.
And hope
Goodbye
that
to
you
all of
will
you.
continue to be with us.
Thank you, Shirali. Thank you, Shailesh.
Goodbye, all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Special thanks to Gajanan Rao, Harsh Tankha, KF, Vijay Chabda, and all participants. Thank you very much.
Good day to all of you.
Thank you. Nice of you. बंद कर दें टोके जी.